On Insight this week, the nuclear crisis in Japan has cast doubt over the role of nuclear as an alternative energy option. Will that spell the end of a nuclear renaissance? And the desire for greater opposition voice in Parliament. Will a two-party system serve the interest of Singapore better? Hello, I'm Gerard Lam. Welcome to Inside. A month after the devastating earthquake, emergency crews at Japan's earthquake-hit nuclear plant in Fukushima are still battling to prevent the nuclear crisis from spinning further out of control. Although there's been no radiation-related deaths in Japan, the crisis has forced a number of countries to rethink their energy policies due to safety concerns. But will nuclear power, often cited as an energy option, stand a chance after the Fukushima crisis? When officials of the Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, took a 45-degree bow recently, it wasn't to express deep gratitude or respect, but regret. Regret for a crisis that had erupted at their nuclear power plant. Regret that not more was done to mitigate the effects now seen following the March earthquake and tsunami.
You not only have the irradiated workers, the $25 billion loss of the facility itself, you also have the stock market collapse, 6 to 12% declines on the market a few days after the accident. You've got Toshiba and TEPCO shares falling. You've got contaminated food, milk, produce, and fish. You have foreigners wanting to leave the economy. You have a safety review of the reactor type that was used in the Fukushima plant around the world. You could add these up, you're probably talking hundreds of billions of dollars of damages.
The crisis also led to a publicity fiasco. While the earthquake and tsunami left over 25,000 dead or missing, the nuclear crisis had just 2 fatalities. Yet public attention has been on the crisis, casting doubts over the future of nuclear. At a time when its fortunes are being revived, Fukushima has effectively hit the pause button.
Wenn andere Möglichkeit wäre das schon okay, abschalten, aber die andere Möglichkeit besteht noch nicht. Vor allen Dingen, es muss bezahlbarer Strom sein, auch bezahlbarer Strom für die kleinen Leute.
Reacting swiftly to the crisis, China suspended approvals for new plants, as India ordered safety reviews of its facilities. The Italian government froze plans to relaunch nuclear projects for a year, while in Germany, a formerly pro-nuclear Angela Merkel declared that her view on nuclear energy has changed.
Und ich sage ganz deutlich, es gibt bei dieser Sicherheitsprüfung keine Tabus. Genau aus diesem Grunde werden wir die erst kürzlich beschlossene Verlängerung der Laufzeiten der deutschen Kernkraftwerke aussetzen. Und dies ist ein Moratorium, und dieses Moratorium gilt für 3 Monate.
7 of Germany's 17 plants were also shut down. But the move was too little too late. Merkel lost precious votes at a key state election. She's keen, however, to review the country's future energy mix, which could include more gas from Russia. In the medium term, this is what analysts expect will happen. More radical rethinking over energy strategies. No doubt, the question uppermost on most minds would be, should nuclear be included in the basket of options? But the real question should be, can countries afford not to consider nuclear?
If we want to do something to mitigate or adapt climate change, we cannot do without nuclear. Nuclear may not be the ultimate solution, but definitely nuclear is interim solution. Transition from fossil fuel-based economy to non-fossil fuel-based economy is nuclear. So we cannot live without nuclear.
But the foremost concern must be safety. More than a month after the Daiichi nuclear plants became stricken, the risk of it suddenly releasing greater amounts of radioactive particles remains. Officials are still trying to contain radiation leaks, and the government is no more forthcoming about information than when the accident first happened. Dr. Chang feels safety should entail information sharing, such as when Japan decided to dump low-level radioactive waste into the sea near South Korea.
This time, when they released the water to the sea, they didn't share even data with Korea, which is 1,000 kilometers away. I don't think that is a very nice practice. So, information sharing, that will help the world to come up with a better solution in using nuclear energy.
Having common standards is another way to improve safety levels. In the European Union, home to about 140 nuclear reactors, there is no consensus on the role of nuclear in the grouping's future. While countries like Denmark and Ireland are strongly anti-nuclear, France is firmly for it. And even though a European treaty called the Euratom exists to coordinate member states' research programs, it lacks the teeth to compel members to conduct stress tests on its nuclear plants post-Fukushima. One reason why the nuclear reactors in Fukushima failed is that they were built to withstand a 7-magnitude earthquake. Many argue that new and better technology will make the industry safer, although some are not entirely convinced.
I mean, the nuclear industry is improving, but I think what's really interesting about their improvement is it is slow. Fukushima design wasn't probably suitable for a tsunami earthquake region. We know that now, but it took us 3 decades to learn it. Now, this is especially apt when you compare nuclear to renewables. Solar panels, wind turbines, etc. have a turnover less than a year. Why not learn in an area which is more suited to actually use what we learned in a way that can improve safety, reliability?
Liaoning, China. Work is ongoing to build one of 80 nuclear reactors, including those still in the planning stages. In its latest 5-year plan, China has set itself the target of getting 11% of the energy it needs from sources other than fossil fuels. Now, it's only 8%. Renewable energy is one avenue. Nuclear is another.
China basically gets energy from coal, about 70%. Nuclear is less than 2%. So to meet their huge demand growth, there may not be many alternatives if they eliminate nuclear. So nuclear has to be considered a part of their fuel mix.
Countries, especially emerging ones, have made a case for nuclear so as to rely less on oil-exporting nations and to prepare for the time when oil supplies dwindle. But opponents point out that oil shocks came and went, and countries without nuclear capabilities fared no worse than those with.
We did a really interesting study a few years ago looking at energy security in the OECD, including France, including Japan, the United States. We compared performance of these countries from 1970 to 2007, and what we found was that there wasn't really much of a correlation with nuclear power and improved energy security. It kind of suggests that maybe nuclear power has been oversold as a panacea to energy security problems.
Switching to nuclear could also mean relying more on uranium-exporting countries, uranium being the fuel used in the reactors. It also means cost incurred from enriching uranium, building spent fuel storage areas, and decommissioning sites.
The quoted costs in 2000 for a new reactor were about $2,000 per installed kilowatt, right? Or $2 billion for a 1,000 megawatt plant. They've now gone up to 8,000 to 10,000. They've gone up by 5 times because of shortages of material, reactor vessels, containment vessels, plus shortages of engineers, long safety regulatory times to actually get approval, uncertainty over uranium fuel supplies, etc.
But Dr. Chang Yang-ho, energy economist, says the numbers make sense.
The cost of generating 1 kilowatt electricity by oil and natural gas is about 4 to 5 cents, US cent per kilowatt hour. Nuclear is about 7 to 8, or some cases about 12 cents. So then if we take account of carbon emissions, okay, 1 kilowatt hour of, I think the 1 megawatt hour of electricity require 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide from coal powered. Nuclear is about 24 grams, so almost nil. So if we introduce carbon pricing, nuclear can be more competitive. History tells us that technology will lower the cost of generating electricity. The fossil fuel generating technology may be stabilized or constant, but nuclear may be lower.
There's also the moral dilemma of how to handle nuclear waste.
They would have to store the waste for thousands of years, and people don't want to live near them, which means you've now stored all of your waste on site at reactor facilities, which, as the case of Fukushima shows, can be quite dangerous. I don't like the idea of creating an energy system that now has highly toxic, concentrated waste that will now have to be cared for, not only by my children, but my children's children, and their children for up to 10,000 years.
The alternatives to nuclear are renewable energy and gas, but none will be as cheap, energy-rich or convenient as oil. Because of the high barriers to entry, nuclear also has that added allure that feeds a nation's pride like no other energy source, which explains why many countries in Southeast Asia are contemplating nuclear. This even though studies show they have enough renewable resources potential to meet rising electricity demands. But in Asia, there remain many subduction zones or areas where tectonic plates could collide, resulting in events like earthquakes. The potential for a Fukushima-style crisis thus remains very real.
All these subduction zones have not produced big earthquakes in 100 years or more. The greens are places where we either know one is likely to happen, like here offshore Sumatra, 8.8, or here along Java, which is possible. Same with the Philippines, same with this part of the Philippines and Taiwan. And then some people even think that this big subduction zone here, and in fact, this one over here could produce big tsunamis and earthquakes that would affect places like Shanghai, places like Kaohsiung, places like Manila, what else? Places like Padang over here, and of course the south coast of Java and Bali.
Should a nuclear fallout like Fukushima happens, not many countries will be able to contain it.
It gets kind of scary when you look at the International Atomic Energy Agency's guidelines for nuclear power plants. They have like a laundry list of more than like 60 criteria a country has to fulfill if they're going to go nuclear. And I mean, that list has so many things that Southeast Asian countries don't have. Access to roads, access to water, a strong electricity network, good safety culture, the ability to detect radiation. Most likely, if there were to be an accident, these governments not only wouldn't be able to contain it, they'd probably keep it secret.
Nuclear power was only just emerging from the shadow of the catastrophic Chernobyl explosion in 1986. Now Fukushima threatens to derail this renaissance. But with the growing global demand for energy and the inability of other energy sources to meet those demands, it appears that nuclear is here to stay despite the risk. What's important is that decisions about it are made, knowing it's a long-term responsibility to be shouldered only after much thought.
Know what the Earth can produce. Wherever you build that nuclear reactor, know what the Earth can do. Given what just happened to a society that is extraordinarily careful about these things, we're going to be more than extraordinarily careful.
From Japan, we move closer to home to look at how political parties in Singapore are gearing up for the next general election. Stay tuned.